Hello everyone! Today I'm going to be featuring the Nueve De Julio once more because Wargaming has actually announced that this ship is already final. This time also my matchmaking, I'm going to show how it performs with top tier matchmaking as compared to my previous commentary in which we were up against a lot of tier 8s. And it performed really well against tier 8s, but of course against the same or lower tier, the ship is quite the monster. If you want all the stats, the details, what's its concealment, what's its speed, firepower, all of these details, you can watch my previous commentary because that hasn't changed. So rather than go over all of that one more time, I'm instead gonna focus a bit more on how the ship plays, because it is a bit of a weird cruiser in the sense that it is extremely slow at 30 knots. It has terrible range at 13.6 km, but on the other hand, it does have the absolutely absurd heal available. Now, first things first, Minikaze is pushing aggressively, so I turn away and I prepare my guns for him. The Akatsuki is going to spot him, so I have all my HE shells ready, and of course, IFHE 15 guns is disgusting, especially against destroyers, because, well, you hit them and yeah, that's pretty much all his health gone, and the Akatsuki finishes him off with a torpedo. Very questionable rush. In general though, you want to angle all the time in this ship. Now this isn't very unique to cruisers in that sense, but even sitting stationary and angled is better than moving and full broadside, because you are more than capable of trading with other cruisers. You will happily trade. In this case I give broadside because I know he has HE loaded, but in general you're more than happy to trade equally with other cruisers, because other cruisers at this tier of course cannot heal up, whereas you can. So any sort of trades you make will eventually end up benefiting you when you pop your heal and you recover. The Akatsuki decided to smoke up and sit in the smoke. And this is of course a bit awkward. I say I need intelligence data, and his smoke play doesn't really make any sense. Now you see this quite often. Destroyers, they park full broadside in their smoke and then they just sit there, and they don't really understand that their role is supposed to be scouting. They expect someone else to scout for them, which is kind of silly considering especially a torpedo boat, an IGN-DD should be the one sailing around scouting because he has the least effectiveness from a smoke. This kind of highlights one of the issues with this ship though. You want to play in smokes, you want to hide behind islands, in general you don't want to sail around in the open too much, and if your DDs, both my Haida and my Akatsuki, are playing especially stupid in the sense that they're both hiding behind islands, even though there's no DDs here. All the DDs have been spotted on the other side, so there's actually nothing that could spot them. In fact, the Akatsuki is willing to torp blind from the smoke rather than go out and scout and then torpedo. He could probably have hit this Mayoko quite easily, for example. But this of course highlights one of the issues of the ship, is that if you're forced to do your scouting for yourself, you are in quite significant trouble, because with 13.6 km range, well, you'd be basically popping up at very close range to enemy ships, and you don't have any fighter plane, you don't have any spotter plane, you really have no vision of gaining, you have no way of gaining vision besides physically yourself peeking out around islands and gaining it yourself, which of course puts you right in the firing lines. In this case I got a good enough position that I can use the island to greatly limit the incoming fire. But on maps that don't have these convenient islands, a lot of islands you can position around, it becomes significantly harder. Switching to AP, since they are giving me a fair amount of broadsides. Of course, the HE alone does disgusting damage, and the only time I really recommend using this low caliber AP is when people give you these kinds of broadsides as the Mayoko is giving right here. And it leads to some nice citadels and some good chunk of damage. But surprisingly, even with the double citadel, the damage isn't really that much higher than what we got with HE. And of course, as soon as he angles, it falls off significantly. So most of the time, this is very much a pure HE spammer. That's all you want to be doing. You want to be sitting there and spamming HE as much as possible. Now, my team is actually kind of dying here, but looking at the damage though, I've still done like already 64k damage, and considering I've been pretty much exclusively shooting cruisers, that's a pretty significant chunk of damage. The Hydro next to me is of course spotting all these torps, so I'm pretty confident in reversing to get better firing angles and once again deal a bit more damage. I'm not too worried about any incoming HE damage because of course the heal is ridiculous, so once again trading with the Mayoko like this I will happily do that. He deals, even though he has significantly more health than I do, he has survivability expert, and he was in a division with another Mayoko. Even though he has that health advantage, my heal allows me to recover significantly more health than he could possibly ever have. As long as, of course, I don't get Citadel. The problem with Citadels, the reason why I keep highlighting that you don't want to get Citadel in the ship or you don't want to get Torps is because you heal significantly less Citadel damage than you heal other types of damage. From HE and AP pens you heal 50%. From fire damage, you heal fire and flooding, you heal 100%, whereas Citadel damage is around 30% there. There's some differences in the modifiers. Battleships, for example, only heal 10% Citadel damage, but in general, Citadel damage is the most punishing to any type of healing ship for the simple reason that you can heal so much less of it. So in general, eating raw HE damage and trading is much better than trying to avoid shells and ending up eating Citadels. Peeking out around the island, Algeria is spotted, double fire, he instantly damage cons. I kind of pop my defensive AA and shoot down this plane. Once again, the AA is quite good, but I did mention the limits to its range in my previous commentary. Once again, all of those values, all of that stuff are available in my previous commentary because nothing has actually changed. This commentary is significantly more focused on how the ship plays, and this kind of island-hugging, careful playstyle does sum it up quite accurately. You are a light cruiser, and you have very limited range and very limited speed, so any sort of open gameplay makes life hard. And the issue is, of course, if any sort of open water gameplay is hard for you, you will always rely on your teammates to provide you the intelligence, aka the spotting, because every time you have to do it yourself, well, you're not really playing it to do your full role. Kind of like an Atlanta, except the Atlanta, of course, has the advantage of having radar and, of course, significantly better arcs, which means he can park closer to islands and have better cover. Not to say that these arcs aren't good, they're perfectly capable of lobbing shells over islands, but it's nowhere near Atlanta's type of arcs that, of course, fit the ship's playstyle extremely well. The first of the Mayokos will die. We're still behind though. We're quite significantly behind. It does help equalize a bit. Someone else gets the kill, but it does help equalize the score a fair amount. Omaha pops up, lower tier cruisers of course. One of the reasons why I don't like tier 5 is, unless you're stupidly overpowered, there's no point playing tier 5 because everything wrecks you. In fact, there's a handful of tier 5 ships that are strong enough to deal with tier 7s because they are so stupidly strong, and that's the like of Kamikaze, Fujin, Julio Cesar, what else do we have at tier 5? Gremiashi. Those are the kind of ships that they're just so brokenly overpowered at tier 5 that they're actually fun to play in the current meta against constant tier 7s. The rest of the ships, not so much. The Omaha actually shot a significant amount of AP, which wasn't a bad idea considering I was giving a lot of broadside trying to angle away from the Mayoko. Now we have some serious issues though. Our cap is being contested and I need my Haida to go there because all our other DDs have managed to die. This is very common in random battles. Your DDs tend to suicide very quickly because they have very little self-preservation. My Haida needs to turn and rush the cap. He's trying to pick a fight with this Mayoko, which is very much not recommended. Still though, I'm down to a 1 versus 1 in this case, well, or there's only one enemy ship left, which means I will happily take a fight in the open, because with AR kicking in especially, my raw DPM is insane. And of course my fire chance is very high as well, and I'm very close at 10 kilometers, so I can quite confidently also land a lot of shells. So I don't mind trading, letting the Mayoko land a few HE volleys at me while I land HE volleys at him, because once again, when it comes to raw HE damage trading, the Nueve is god tier. It's fantastic at this. I get 2 fires on him, so I know he's already dead, and I turn around and I try to rush our cap. Our Haida is, by the looks of it, turning towards our cap. I need to make sure though that he doesn't seem very aware. Earlier in the game he hid behind islands instead of scouting, and when they started capping he didn't react at all. He started sailing towards the enemy ship. So to make sure, I'm literally telling him to scout our spawn, because it looks like he's actually sailing towards the enemy spawn. I don't know if he read it or not, but he does turn towards our spawn, so at least now we have a destroyer going in there. Our York rushed the cap and delayed, and even though okay, one of the Mayokos is calling me a cheater and a pussy idiot cheater. This is very common though. when you play any sort of ship whose playstyle works in what some people consider dishonorable, aka hiding behind islands or torpedo ships or whatever, people tend to get really upset with you. And most of the time it stems from them not really understanding how certain ships play. So I give him a very diplomatic answer to help disarm his aggression, and he greatly enjoys it, and we're friends now, so that's good. The High does finally push into the cap. I didn't want to mention the York though, because I really like the York's play. He pushed into the cap to delay it. Yes, he got killed, but it was probably one of the reasons why we simply didn't straight up lose the game, because he delayed the capture point so much. If the enemy had rushed in with all their DDs, they could easily have flipped the point, if it wasn't for the York pretty much sacrificing his life here. Chanwei does get spotted, and he grounds, trying to torpedo the Galissoniere. I think he's trying to torpedo the Galissoniere. My raw HE deals with him very quickly though, and I've managed to push into the cap now. Keep note that I'm constantly keeping my nose towards the Scharnhorst. This is Scharnhorst and Nürnberg. This is very important, because this is what you have to do. If you have to push into the open where the ship is much more vulnerable, especially when you have DDs scouting you and you don't have any Hydro, you don't have anything like this, keeping your nose pointed towards the enemy battleship is pretty much your bread and butter. At this point though, a cap has been cleared up, and I'm gonna see if I can start working on this Nürnberg instead. I'm gonna turn away and start kiting away, because you don't want to be sailing full broadside to a Nürnberg. That AP will easily citadel you. And Simstorps pop up. Simstorps will probably deal about 8k damage, so I quickly pop my heal, even though it's not an optimal heal. It does bump my health up to 10k before the torp hits, and my health does jump down to sub 2k at one point, so I'm pretty sure without the heal I would have instantly died there. So that keeps me alive, and now I just start kiting away. I have of course used my damage con for the torpedo, so I'm making sure to create as much distance as possible, because one single fire could kill me at this point. He is very focused on me though, which means the Leon gets free shots. I get a fire on him, and I don't think he has damage con anymore, so he's already quite dead, which means I will be able to angle even more, and I go full stern away from him, and I basically just let him burn to death with my HE shells in the air. The Leon helps out, and my fire looks like it's gonna burn him out. All I need to do is survive the last few seconds, and I do in fact survive. So any sort of, you see though, how quickly the effectiveness of the ship goes down once you're forced into open water fights. 1 versus 1 open water fights, you're great. But when you have to fight multiple ships on the enemy fleet, the combination of lack of speed and lack of range means that, well, very much like the Atlanta, you want to be hugging your islands, you want to be hugging your smokes, and that means you have to rely a lot on teammate spotting to give you that information. And that's always going to be a significant downside of this ship. Of course, in divisions and such, I mean, if you combine the ship with something like a Flint and you got a monster, or just a DD willing to smoke you up, something like a Mayhem, and you got an absolute monster. Even without those things, like just playing solo, this thing is monumentally strong, simply because of that heal. The heal gives it so much more survivability than any other light cruiser at this tier. I mean, even tier 8 light cruisers or any sort of cruisers will struggle to reach the kind of survivability this thing has. As long as you don't let yourself get citadeled, it's very unlikely that you will get killed quick. You just have to play it intelligently, very positional type of gameplay. The game does end, 132k damage, 4 kills. Sadly no rewards or anything, because this is of course a test ship, but I'm still pretty satisfied with the score itself. Looking at the team score, 2.3k, and yeah, I'm pretty satisfied with how it went. This is of course being top tier, which means life is a lot easier, but then on the other hand, the ships I fought was I fought the Mayokos, I fought the Algérie, and these are pretty much tier 7 cruisers, and it does show you what kind of bully you can be against same tier cruisers, as long as of course you don't let them citadel you. And it's very easy to say don't let them citadel you, but it's quite a bit harder to actually put it into action, because at 13.6 km range, all of these ships with their 203 or 200mm guns, or 200mm and higher guns, they will easily citadel you if you give them broadside. So it's something to keep in mind. I think I just got some mail. Sorry about that sound. And looking at the detailed report, of course, we get to see the highlight of what is basically the ship, and that's the damage received. 63,000 damage received. Once again, spread out very evenly among just taking a lot of chip damage, a lot of HE chip damage, and that's why we survived the most of it. The biggest issue was the torpedo, which we obviously shouldn't have eaten, but it was, we had our heal available, and it was a Sims torp, so it wasn't actually the end of the world. But keep in mind that something like eating a single Shiratsuyu torp will greatly cripple your gameplay, because that's so much health you lose that you won't be able to heal back. And even though you technically can heal something like, how much did I went over it in my last commentary, you can heal a ton. You actually rarely get to fully appreciate all that healing that you have available. So something like 60k plus health, that's already more than enough to be absolutely monstrous compared to your competition. My fire damage was extremely pitiful, but then again, we were mostly shooting cruisers and DDs. There was almost no battleships for me to shoot at. I don't think I even shot at a battleship once, so that value will of course greatly depend on what kind of competition you're facing. Ultimately though, my build is still the same. IFHE priority followed by concealment expert, 3-point perk is superintendent because the additional heal, AR because, well, your health tends to bounce a lot thanks to the healing, and of course priority target. So that's a basic 14-point captain, and then whatever else you want to add on top of that, fire chance, whatever, that's entirely up to you. Still though, this ship absolutely gets a strong recommendation for me. This is a very strong cruiser. It does have its downside, speed, not similar, less DPM than the Helena, really garbage range and so forth, but the healing more than makes up for it, and it's quite fun to play as well. It really is quite fun to play, because if you mess up in any other tier 7 cruiser, you're kind of crippled for the rest of the game. If you mess up in this ship, you can probably heal and recover a significant chunk. So when it comes to cruiser gameplay, as long as you don't get blapped, it's pretty forgiving and it's pretty fun. It gets my recommendation. I hope you guys enjoyed this commentary, and I will talk to you guys later.